Okay, if we were actually out in the field, I would explain the site since we're looking at it, but since we're inside, I'm just going to start with sort of the background for the project. Like Brett said, I'm dealing with reclamation, and that means that we try to recover disturbed areas, areas that don't have the vegetation we want, back to something that is desirable. This is important, especially in Wyoming, because of all the mining activity. I'm focusing mostly on the oil mining and the natural gas. So it's usually just a small 1, maybe 2 acre area. So a lot of the treatments that we're doing are very condensed, small area. The biggest problem sometimes with reclamation is the weed pressure. This site is a really good example of that because of all the cheatgrass that occurs in this area. The problem with weeds in reclamation is if you have so many weeds, just like in a field or a garden, it competes with your desirable species. So one of the field bulletins focuses on the impacts of herbicide in reclamation projects. I have, and then the other bulletin focuses on the impacts of our desirable seeded species. I have 3 sites, one here, one in Laramie, and one about half hour south of here at Ucross. At each site we have 3 blocks, so we have replication within the site. We have 10 different seeded species and or mixes, 8 single grass species, 1 or 2 mixes, 1 a forb shrub, 1 composed of grasses, forbs, and shrubs, which we call the ecological site description mix. That ecological site description is composed of species that would have occurred on the site. Like here, this was a needle and thread grass community, so we tried picking species that would have existed here before. Let's see. So we have the seeded species and then herbicides. We had 15 different herbicide treatments, 14 herbicide treatments, 1 check. Of the herbicide treatments, most of them were applied both fall and spring. Some of them were at high and low rates. And then we also seeded our desirable species in the fall and then again in the spring, so we could look at the impacts of season, of application timing upon reclamation success. So when you combine all of those treatments and blocks, we had 900 sub-plots per site, and we had 3. So we have a lot of measurements that we take during the summer. We haven't measured anything this year. We tried to do it about peak biomass, which will maybe this year be in June. Maybe it'll be a bit later. So the information in the field bulletin is on the 2nd year after treatment data. You can look through those graphs, those tables, and see some of the things that we're beginning to see. We're starting to see that there are some species that do much better than others, as we'd expect. Mostly here, it was the introduced species, crested wheatgrass and Russian wild rye, as well as some of the other wheatgrasses, blue bunch wheatgrass, stream bank wheatgrass, all natives. We're also seeing some good chemical control of weeds. A lot with the, it's a not relatively new chemical, but it's not currently labeled for use in rangelands or cropland situations, but it's called aminocyclopyrachlor, and it has relatively good broadleaf weed control, and we're seeing a little bit of grass impacts as well. This summer we will collect a 3rd year of treatment, which is very typical for a reclamation project. Usually the longer term you have for discovering patterns and what's happening is more desirable. One thing I noticed, and we would be able to see this if we were closer to the site, is that this 3rd year after treatment, we're not seeing as many of the herbicide treatments that we saw before. But hopefully this summer when we collect data, we'll be able to see whether that first 2 years of weed control helped our desirable species to establish. I think that's a quick and dirty explanation of what I'm doing, and I would love to take any questions. And of course, if the rain stops, I do have a few things labeled if you guys want to go out and see the site.